Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to today's webinar, the National Baptist Convention USA Incorporated Hope Health Initiative, Black Women and HIV AIDS. In this interactive webinar, the National Baptist Convention USA Incorporated Hope Health Team will share about Black women and HIV AIDS. We bring you greetings today on behalf of our President, Dr. Jerry Young, our General Secretary, Dr. Alvin Edwards, the chair of our Federal Faith-Based Initiative, Dr. Alvin Love, and our director, National Director of our NBC USA Hope Health Initiative, Dr. Michael O. Minor. Look, we are excited today because we're doing this in partnership. We're on several different venues today. So we want to acknowledge we are on Facebook and YouTube with the National Faith-Based Mobilization Network, Mid-South Churches Cooperative Conference Baptist State Convention, and the Hill-Hernando Baptist Church. So if you are watching on one of those different venues, feel free to share in your social media. We thank everybody that's already joined us on this morning. We'll do our best to capture the questions that you have. We are broadcasting this via Zoom, but we'll do our best to capture your questions. And we thank you so much for pausing in the middle of the day to join us on this most worthwhile webinar. I want to begin today by introducing our panelist, Dr. Tamara Rose. All right. She is a sex educator. Let me bring her up on the screen so we can see her there. All right. There we go. Looking wonderful today. She's a womb healer, author, and speaker with more than 20 years of experience speaking, writing, and teaching about human sexuality. She travels the country doing this thing. She's been working with faith-based organizations. She's provided training and working with over 90 churches with Your Blessed Health. She's an author of several books, including Live Inspired, Feel Empowered, I Am Sex, a comprehensive guide to understanding women's sexuality. And it's not the birds and the bees, it's sex. All right. And she has been featured in several national publications. She has doctorate degrees. She's got, she's got social work, master social work degrees. She's got a master of science and education degree. She got a bachelor art. This sister's educated. All right. And we're excited about her joining us on today. We know that we will be definitely blessed as we hear her share on today. Thank you so much to the good doctor. All right. No such thing as a bad doctor, but it's a good doctor. All right. And just to set the tone before we bring forth our most capable facilitator, we want to give you some background as we look forward to Sunday, which is a double dose. It is our National Black HIV/AIDS Awareness Day and National Black HIV/AIDS Sunday. Around 1.1 million people are living with HIV in the United States. People with HIV need to know their HIV status so they can take medicine to treat HIV. Taking HIV medicine as prescribed can make the level of virus in the body very low, called viral suppression, or even undetectable. A person with HIV who takes HIV medicine as prescribed and gets and stays virally suppressed or undetectable can stay healthy and has effectively no risk of sexually transmitting HIV to HIV negative partners. It is important for Black Americans to know their HIV status so they can take medicine to treat HIV if they have the virus. People who get and keep an undetectable viral load can stay healthy for many years and have effectively no risk of transmitting HIV to their sex partners. HIV remains a disproportionate risk to Black Americans. Young Black, gay, and bisexual men account for more new HIV infections than any other group. And HIV affects Black heterosexual women more than women of any other race or ethnicity. More than 290,000 Black Americans with stage 3 HIV/AIDS have died since the start of the epidemic. Prevention efforts have led to encouraging decreases in HIV among Black Americans, driven by steep declines among Black women. And after years of troubling increases infections have stabilized among Black, gay, and bisexual men. However, given the continued impact among Black Americans, there is still an urgent need to expand access to HIV prevention and treatment, underscoring the importance of the federal initiative Ending the Pandemic, a plan for America. That sets the stage for our overview. Now, once again, we are restreaming across our social media platforms. We'll do our best to interact with you. But now I present our most capable webinar facilitator, Sister Bettina Campbell, LMSW, and our National Mental Health A Better Way coordinator for the National Baptist Convention USA Incorporated Hope Health Initiative. Sister Bettina will now take us further. It's in your hands, Sister Bettina.
Thank you so much, Dr. Miner. Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Dr. Rose. We're so happy to have you here with us today. And given all of the information that Dr. Miner just shared, why is it important that we still have this conversation about Black women and HIV?
First of all, thank you for inviting me to participate in such a powerful and much needed dialogue around HIV, especially when we talk about Black women, Black folk in general, but particularly Black women. It's so important that we continue to have this conversation because as Dr. Miner indicated during our introduction, that Black women continually are disproportionately impacted by HIV. And then when we talk about how Black women view or not view risk in our sexual behaviors and our sexual pleasure, it's so important that we look at the language around HIV and how it does impact us, and having conversations like this, continually keeping HIV in the forefront, continuing to teach Black women, particularly how to protect ourselves and keep ourselves safer, is such an important conversation that's needed. It's not like a one-time conversation and we don't pick it up again. It's something that continuously needs to stay at the front of the conversation.
Wonderful. So ever since HIV was diagnosed in 1970s, many of the Black churches have seen this as a gay issue. What are some ways that we can help them to overcome this misconception?
I think some of the ways that we can help them overcome this misconception is by conversations like this, by helping folk to understand that it was not only the Black churches, right, that saw HIV as a gay white male disease, even the framing of HIV to the society at large by, governmental agencies, the way they framed the conversation around HIV, they helped us to believe that if you weren't gay or if you weren't a white male or an injectable drug user, that you weren't at risk. But continually, the statistics continues to show that, Black people, and again, specifically Black women, are disproportionately impacted by this disease. And so one of the things that we can do, or one of the things that the churches can do, is to step up to understand that, first of all, anybody who's engaging in any type of behaviors, sexual behaviors, anal, oral, or vaginal sex, sharing needles of any kind, and we're not just talking about injectable drug needles, right? We're talking about needles that may be used for prescription drugs like diabetics, or we're talking about folks who may use injectable steroids, or people who share needles for body piercing or tattooing. Anyone who engages those quote unquote risk behaviors put themselves at risk for HIV. It's a human issue. It's not a Black or white or woman, male, heterosexual, homosexual. It is a human issue. And if you're engaging in any behaviors that put you at quote unquote risk or coming in contact with any of those bodily fluids, those 4 bodily fluids that transmit HIV, you're at risk. And then we also, by helping the churches to understand that you have to save a life before you can save a soul, which means ministering to the needs of that human, and providing that safe space for them to be able to come and have conversations about sexuality within the congregation, not feeling that they will be safer and not being judged, is another strategy. But also training faith leaders, because a lot of times they don't have the information to educate their congregation on HIV. They don't know the ways to go about it, and helping the leaders of the congregation to understand this and helping them to become more comfortable with having a conversation and creating a safer space for their congregation and their community that they're serving is so important, because historically, when we talk about the Black community, it's been the pillar of our community. It's the foundation. It's where people who are sick, whatever that means, right, go to get healed. And so helping them to understand their vital role in stepping up as leaders within the Black community is so essential, so that they can become that space for their congregants and their communities that they're serving.
Well, it sounds like you have a lot of good ideas about how to work with the faith community. And I believe that I've read somewhere that you have done an extensive amount of work with the faith community. Can you tell us how that work got started and how it's going now?
Yeah, so thank you for that. I had the opportunity, I think it was probably in '96, to develop a curricula that was called Your Blessed Health. And we implemented it within, actually, we convened a group of First Ladies to have a conversation with them about the importance of including sexuality programming, comprehensive sexuality program, which of course would include HIV and sexually transmitted infections within their congregation. So we convened this group of women, First Ladies, and we talked about what that would look like. And so we put together, the curriculum was already developed because it was developed for actually a pregnancy prevention program. And we found that the skills that and the resources that was within that curriculum could be applicable to pretty much any type of condition. And so again, we convened the First Ladies and we talked about the core elements that we could utilize to implement into a program, an actual program based on that curricula. And so we piloted with those First Ladies and it went really well. And then eventually it spanned into an intervention, an evidence-based intervention, because the University of Michigan came in, the Prevention Research Center, they came in and they started to put the science behind the work that we were doing with the First Ladies. And then it continued to expand to involve the National Coalition of Pastor Spouses. And ultimately it turned into a manual, one of the first manuals in the country that was endorsed by the Department of Health and Human Services, a faith-based manual for HIV and AIDS. And it was one of the first manuals that was introduced to the faith community as a tool and a resource for educating the faith community around HIV and AIDS. And that manual came out in 2004. So since '96, I've had the opportunity to train around 90 churches across 9 denominations across the country, helping them to understand the importance of implementing sexuality programming, providing them the training and the tools. And the programs were not actually led by myself, they were led by faith leaders within those particular congregations. And so we taught like communication skills, negotiation skills, other skills like iMessages, like how to effectively have personal agency over your body, and what those things look like. And then some of the organizations, the faith organizations or churches that we work with, they were open to us bringing in condoms. Some of them were like, no, that's a little too much. We had even some First Ladies and some pastors coming to pick up, faith leaders coming to pick up condoms from our organization. And so there's several peer-reviewed articles that are out there. You can just search Your Blessed Health, Flint, Michigan, and you'll see you have the opportunity to kind of review some of the literature that's out there about this particular program and the effectiveness of it, the validity of it, and how like I said, how effective it is, when implemented with fidelity.
Okay, so having said that, I noticed that you said that there were seven First Ladies that helped to implement this. Is the program focused on women, and why?
Yeah, the program is focused on it's not necessarily, I won't say focused on women, but it's designed, or it was designed with the understanding of the unique complexities of women's sexuality and the intersectionality of all the dimensions that we as women reside in. So when I talk about the dimensions that we as women and just human beings, actually reside in, we're talking about our mental dimension, our emotional dimension, our spiritual dimension, our energetical dimension, our biochemical, ancestral, legal, social, institutional, political dimension. At any given time, we reside in all these different dimensions. And so we had to have a curricula, some resources and some skills and some tools to teach, everybody who participated in the program, but women in particularly, how to effectively navigate and balance those dimensions in their sensuality and their sexuality and their health within all of those dimensions, and the intersectionality of just being a Black woman, right? And all the things that come along with being a Black woman, the narratives, the strong Black woman narratives, and how that contributes to us putting ourselves at risk, right? Or talking about domestic violence and the intersectionality of being in unhealthy relationships, how that puts us as Black women at risk, right? And then we looked at those other social determinants like lack of access to healthcare, lack of insurance, poverty, and all of these other sorts of things that impact us when it comes to making decisions about our healthcare. So for example, if I'm a mother of 2 or 3 kids and I have to make a decision about dragging these 2 or 3 kids to a bus after bus after bus to get to a physician who's 30 or 40 minutes across town, and I'm already operating on limited income and I need to go get my health checked out, but I don't want to drag these kids across town. I don't have a babysitter. I barely have insurance. Like all of these decisions that women, especially Black women, have to make when it comes to navigating and facilitating our health and having personal agency over our bodies. Oftentimes we're just not going to drag those babies across town, and we put ourselves on the back burner. So it also looked at changing the mindset of self-care, and what does that look like as Black women, because a lot of times folks think that self-care is selfish, and it absolutely is, because we are self and we have to unpack our ish. And so when we look at all of these things, it's important to take them into consideration, especially when looking at Black women and HIV and sexuality and just overall wellness, if that makes sense. And so those were some of the components that we took into consideration when creating this curriculum.
Thank you. Let me ask you a question. You've done this work a lot, and you've done it in multi-facets of positions within the field of HIV. And in doing your direct care services with women, you've identified a lot of different factors that CDC says, and also women themselves say, put them at risk. Is there a story that you would like to share with us about one of those clients that may further highlight what women go through in order to be able to protect themselves, or how they're successfully?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the last part of the question? It was breaking up a little bit.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Is there a story that of one of that you might be able to share with us about how one of your clients may be successfully navigating living with this virus?
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to work with some of the most beautiful souls, women, Black women who are living with HIV. And yeah, I think some of the most successful stories are, for me, is when I see a woman who comes into, the clinic, and she tests positive. She receives her positive test results, or her reactive test results, and it totally crushes her, right? Because this is life-changing information. And given the fact that still in a lot of the communities of color, especially when you talk about the rural South, HIV is still taboo. There's a lack of education. There's a lack of understanding around, again, how this disease is transmitted. Although, it's been diagnosed, or we first heard about HIV since the 70s, the late 70s and early 80s, there's still a lot of myths and misunderstandings surrounding this disease. So it's such a beautiful blessing to see a woman be first diagnosed, not have that support system, to finding that support system, to building up that personal agency, to realizing that I don't have to die because I have this diagnosis. I can completely thrive, and then helping them to reframe the narrative and the language around, not dying with HIV, but living with HIV, and helping them to understand that while they are living with HIV, it's a chronic condition, just like diabetes and heart disease and all of these sorts of things, and that they are not HIV. HIV is just a small part of who they are. And so from that standpoint, they begin to take control, over the disease. They begin to have personal agency over their bodies and understand that, hey, I'm still a beautiful woman. I can still live. I can still love. I can still date. I can still have a partner and do all the amazing things that I was created to do, even within the spectrum of this disease. Now, will I have to make decisions a little bit differently? Yes, but just like someone else who has another type of chronic condition. And then just also helping to educate their families and to help them understand that, unless I'm coming in contact with these 4 bodily fluids, I'm really not at risk for contracting HIV from my loved one. And then seeing these women take their stories and publish them, take their stories and turn them into testimonies and host radio shows, or become advocates, or even become case managers, or peer health educators. They've taken back control over their lives and not allowed HIV to define them, but they've chosen to define HIV and use it to help other women save their lives or live their lives. So, and just to see these beautiful souls come from this point to this point and just taking this thing by the horn and just living with it and being out loud and unapologetic and on purpose is such an amazing, space to sit in. And I've had the opportunity, like you said, Ms. Campbell, to see that transition of, of Black women across the country, be in those spaces.
Okay, that's good to know that there is the perception now of HIV being not a death sentence, but something that we can live with if we take the right steps and apply those steps in the appropriate way, that we can still have the life that we desire to have, or that God has created us to have. So I think that's a wonderful work that you're doing, Mrs. Dr. Rose. What have you found to be the biggest frustration among Black women living with HIV?
I found that the biggest frustration among Black women is that there's not a lot of representation of us at the table. People love to create interventions. People love to create programs. They love to create all of these things, these tools and these resources without us being represented. And so when we are not represented at the table, you're not creating an intervention for us, but you're creating an intervention for us, but not by us. And oftentimes these interventions don't take into consideration the uniqueness of our Blackness. They don't take into consideration the challenges that we as Black women and the complexities as we as Black women face. They don't take into accountability that Black women don't necessarily associate with risk. We associate ourselves sometimes with pleasure. So the language sometimes included in some of the risk assessment forms, or the language that that's spoken to us when we go in to get tested, right? We don't identify with those things. And so I think that's been some of the biggest frustrations, that these interventions are about us, but they're not by us. And then when we think about the research, there's a lack of representation of Black women in research. And how are you researching something that is for us, but you don't have us at the table? You don't have us including our voice in the process. And so those interventions, while well-intended, aren't as effective because you haven't considered us. And so another frustration I hear is that, again, there's still, especially when we think about the Deep South, the Bible Belt, right? There is still a lot of stigma and taboo around HIV. I worked at a clinic here in Georgia, in rural Georgia, and one of our clients used to actually come through the back door because she was afraid of what the folk would think about her if they saw her going into an HIV clinic. Even the name of this particular organization, it used to have a different name that suggested anonymity, but then it was changed to something that included the word HIV or AIDS. And a lot of people stopped coming because I can't have grandma and them drop me off at this clinic because they're gonna wonder why I'm going into this clinic that now says HIV and AIDS when it says something else in the past, right? So that stigma still exists, and that's a lot of frustration for women, and that puts them in a space where they're like, I'm not going to go in and get care. I'm not going to go in and get treatment, right? Because of that stigma. I can't be ousted by my family or my friends. And so, or they might walk into a clinic and the nurse is grandma's best friend. And although, of course, my information is supposed to be kept confidential, we know that that doesn't always happen. And so those are still some of the frustrations and the challenges that I see women facing still.
That's a lot. And So how can we kind of do some work to mitigate some of this stigma or to eliminate the stigma that's around HIV and AIDS?
Again, I think having conversations, being unapologetic about the conversation, spearheading conversations around the naturalization of sexuality. We all got here through some act of sex. It's a very natural thing. It's one of the urges that's formed in our brainstem, and our brainstem is the very first part of our brain that is formed. And so, yes, it's a very natural thing. It's a very natural urge. But then teaching people how to protect themselves and to make safer choices. Educating someone about sexuality doesn't mean that they're going to go out and have sexual intercourse, no more so than telling somebody about death, murder, and all these other things is going to go out there and make them a murderer or a killer, right? Providing people with the tools and the resources should they find themselves in a situation where they need to negotiate safer sex, where they need to take personal agency over their decisions, is a responsible thing that we have to start doing, because when we don't, we set people up for failure. Because I think of a story that a colleague of mine used to tell from her experience working in the field. She had a client who grew up in the church. Her and her boyfriend, they did everything according to the church and according to culture and what they thought that they should be doing. They didn't have sexual intercourse. They went to college. You know, they broke up at some point during college, right? And he went out and he did whatever they did while they were on this break. They got back together and she ended up getting infected with HIV. When they had sex, that was her first partner. So we failed her because we didn't teach her to ask those appropriate questions when they were on a break. What did you do? Who did you have sex with? Did you have sex? What type of sex did you have? You know, and being very specific in those conversations around sexuality, and not being afraid of something that's very natural, right? And then encouraging people to be vigilant about their health and to take personal agency and advocate for themselves, and giving them the resources and the tool, because education is not enough. Because I can tell you all day using a condom consistently and correctly will help to reduce the spread of HIV around 99%. But if I don't tell you where to go get the condom, how to put the condom on, how to properly store the condom, did you know that a condom had an expiration date? Like if I don't give you the full spectrum and give you a tool belt full of tools, then I have failed you, because education, again, is just not enough. And so just really spearheading these conversations is so important. And again, the biggest thing is just to naturalize conversations around sexuality, and create a space for people to feel safe and not guilty and not judge. Because if I don't feel safe, I'm not coming to you. But if I do feel safe and then you start to judge me, I'm going to leave you, right? And so, that's one of the most important things that we can definitely do. And then when we think about our married couples in churches, if we don't talk about sexuality and how to, and how to resolve those situations in marital relationships, we still fail those partners as well. And so just looking at how do we talk about sexuality from a comprehensive perspective. We're not saying promote it and advocate like, hey, just go out there and just have sex and just get all wild with it. That's not what we're saying. We're saying teach people the tools to be responsible, right? Because what comes to mind to me is, again, the mother of 3 children who has to make a decision about feeding her kids, right? And maybe getting, basically what people sometimes consider survival sex. She's having sex to survive because she has to feed her kids, right? But then she has all these internal struggles about how to protect herself, how to keep herself safe. So it's like all of these different layers that we have to think about. We have to sometimes step outside of our proverbial lens of judgment, right? And understand that people make decisions based on life and based on things that they need to sometimes survive. And that includes having conversations around sexuality, because a lot of times that's what people are using to survive in the moment.
Wow, that you said a lot there. You really unpacked a whole lot of stuff. And it kind of brought to me the mind of a Bible scripture that says that we should get wisdom, but with all our wisdom, we should get an understanding. And it's simply what you're saying is that you can have all of this knowledge, but if you don't know how to apply that knowledge, and you don't have the skills to apply that knowledge, and you don't even believe that you can apply that knowledge, then we've still failed you. So is there some kind of specialized training that's available from medical school, or is there some kind of curriculums that people can take or in the community to be able to get the knowledge that you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when we talk about the faith organizations. The organization that I used to work with called Your Center out of Flint, Michigan. You can always reach out to them, to the executive director there or the program director, someone there, to get this information about Your Blessed Health, to get the training to help you to be able, or to help faith organizations be able to implement according to your tenets and your bylaws within your organization, implement sexuality programming in your congregation. And like I said, it's been successful that some of the churches have created sustainable programs, purity programs. Some churches have begin incorporating, sermons, around the particular days like National Black HIV/AIDS Awareness Day or Women and Girls HIV/AIDS Awareness Day. They may have a special sermon or a special program, but you can get the training to be able to, first of all, understand how to have conversations about sexuality within your congregation, why it's important, because this is just an overview of what we're doing today, but the program actually goes much deeper. And your center staff provides that technical assistance even once you've received the training, right, to be able to create sustainable programming within your congregation. Outside of that, you can always reach out to myself. I'm very accessible on all social media platforms under Dr. Tamara Rose. And I would be more than willing to provide information and guidance to folk who have questions about how to implement these programs in their church or in their community-based organizations or aid service organizations. I've been doing this for 30 years now. It's what I was created to do. And I would rather make sure that folk had the right information, whatever right is for them, information to make sure that they're keeping themselves, their congregations, their community, and their families, their partners, all those folks safer.
Thank you for that. And also in terms of resources, we will have resources on our website, the National Baptist Convention USA. We'll have, when this video, this webinar is going to be put on YouTube, and we will have resources there that you can also search out. And then there are any number of national organizations such as the Balm of Gilead, also Black AIDS, that will be able to provide you with some information, or Sister Love in Atlanta. So those links to those organizations will also be on our website. So again, thank you for that information. But what are some steps that you would ask for women who are diagnosed with HIV, and it becomes a burden for them or an emotional problem for them? What are some steps that they can take to manage their mental health during this diagnosis?
I would definitely have them seek out a support system of like-minded individuals, whether that's a support group, whether that's a peer mentor, or whether that's mental health therapy, right? Because again, here we are in the Black community, we underestimate the importance of mental health, because I don't want to be crazy, but what is that, right? We have to help people understand that we all have mental health. It's just where do we lie on the spectrum between illness and wellness, right? And at any given moment, any of us can lie on this end of the spectrum or this end of the spectrum, right? But the goal is to always kind of try to be somewhere in the middle. But we have to naturalize conversations around mental health, especially in the Black community, and helping us to understand that it's not shameful to reach out when we need support. Because again, oftentimes, what are we told? Sweep that under the rug. Well, it happened to grandma and them, it happened to mama and them, you'll be all right going on about your business. And that's one of the most I'm trying to find an appropriate word. That's one of the most harmful or hurtful things that we can do to someone is to dismiss how they feel, because that creates additional layers that people have to peel back and heal. There's so much trauma within the Black community, especially when you think about slavery and how we were conditioned in that narrative around slavery, which ties into Black women's sexuality and sexual health. We were chattel. We were taken at will. We were used. We were breeders. So how do you expect us to have a healthy relationship with our bodies and our sensuality and our sexuality? And then when you think about our male partner who can't protect us, right, from mastering them, now we're mad at them, but intellectually knowing that if they try to protect us, they're going to be put at risk for their lives. So we really don't want them to put themselves at risk, because if they end up trying to save us and they get killed, we're really, going to be in harm's way. But yet you expect us to have a healthy relationship with our male partner. And all of those ancestral imprints and things have been passed down, what we call as intergenerational patterns, and they plague our lineage and will continue to impact our legacy unless we heal the trauma that is held within not only our cellular structure and our DNA, but our body, because our body holds the memories of all these traumas and all these pain from the African diaspora. And so it's so important that we naturalize mental health. We advocate for mental health, and we tell these folks that, you know, and support them and be champions for them to get mental health. Therapy is one of the things that saved my life, you know, and I will always be a champion for therapy, because there's nothing like having a non-biased person to support you and provide you with some tools and some resources that can ultimately save your life. And we're not just talking about your sexuality, we're just talking about your overall wellness. And so again, support groups, peer health mentors, unpacking our trauma, understanding our ancestral trauma, and also doing this within the space of mental health and therapy.
Oh, wonderful. I really appreciate that information. And I hope we're being able to benefit someone out there who's listening. Dr. Tamara, a few minutes ago, you talked about the transmission routes, and you just briefly went over them. Would you go over them again so that women will understand what puts them at risk, not just medically, but also you talked about determinants of health. Can you explain that just a little bit more so that we are getting that knowledge that you talked about we need to get, and an understanding?
Absolutely. So when we think about women, one of the main reasons that women in general are at an increased risk is because our biology, our anatomy, right? We are a receiving partner, which means we are the person that's taking something into our body, in this case, during sexual activity. You know, when we talk about transmission of HIV, it would be the penis, right? And so especially if we're doing or having unprotected sex and that person is ejaculating in us, that semen or that pre-cum is one of the fluids that transmits HIV. And when we think about the anatomy of the vagina, right, it's when we think, well, first of all, let's say when we talk about risk factors, it's anal sex, followed by vaginal sex, followed by oral sex. And the vagina is the second thinnest mucosal membrane, right, in terms of being receptive to HIV. First is the anus, which is like maybe, let's say, about 2 fingers thick or 1 finger thick. And then when we think about the vagina, it's 3 fingers thick, right? When we talk about the oral mucosas, not the oral mucosas, but the mucosas lining, which is what HIV will penetrate when it goes into the body. It attacks those white blood cells that are within those particular mucosas lining, whether it's the anus, whether it's the vagina, or whether it is the mouth. And so the virus attacks those white blood cells. And so because women are the receiving partners, we're taking in all of those fluids, right? When we're talking about sexual intercourse. Other fluids that transmit HIV are breast milk and vaginal fluid. And so anytime we're coming in contact with those fluids, again, most of the time it's heterosexual intercourse, penile vaginal intercourse, or sometimes penile anal intercourse, women will continue to be at risk because we are the receiving partners, and even through oral sex, right? And then if we think about other behaviors that we may be engaged in, like the sharing of the needles and things like that, those things will help to increase our risk directly. But when we talk about indirect risk, we're talking about poverty, we're talking about lack of education, we're talking about lack of insurance, we're talking about stigma, we're talking about shame, we're talking about fear, we're talking about having too much income because I like my lifestyle, right? And I'm accustomed to it. So I don't really care what he or she is over there doing, as long as I'm getting that paper, which is the kind of culture that we have now, right? As long as I'm making money, I'm about them dollars, and I'm getting them dollars. I really don't care what he over there doing or what she's over there doing. Just give me my paper. And if that means I can get a little more money by having unprotected sex with you, I just might do that because I'm about them coins, right? And so that will put me indirectly at risk for HIV because I'm trying to make too much money, and that's all I'm concerned about. And I can get a little bit more having unprotected sex. So I've just put myself at risk, right? And so those are some other things, again, that we have to talk about. Domestic violence, because I don't want him hitting me upside my head, right? I'm just going to go ahead and have unprotected sex with him, knowing that he's out there in those streets. But because I'm not trying to get my tail kicked tonight, I'm going to have sex because I'm tired of that. Or when we think again about survival sex, you know, I'm having sex to survive. A lot of times folks think that people in the sex working industry are there because they choose to be there. A lot of times I'm just trying to survive. And while I might not be my life might not be at immediate risk. But this particular person said, if I don't have sex with these other 5 people tonight, they're going to kill my family. Well, I don't want my family to die, right? And then low self-esteem and even low self-efficacy. I might consider myself to have high self-esteem, but I don't feel like I can negotiate safer sex with my partner. That would mean I have low self-efficacy. That's putting me at risk. So when we talk about all these things around, safer sex and keeping ourselves protected, we have to have a larger conversation besides oral, anal, and vaginal intercourse. That's just where it starts. Those are direct. But what about those indirect methods that I just mentioned? Are we including that in the conversation?
Let me ask you a question, Doctor. When we're talking about the way sex is transmitted, are we relating that to our reproductive system and the importance of keeping our reproductive system safe?
I guess it would be right on who's having the conversation, because sometimes, again, people don't know to have that conversation about the reproductive system. Again, when you think about Black women and how the conversation around sexuality goes in the Black community, just don't. Keep your legs closed and keep your skirt down, your panties up. Like, that's not really helpful to me. That's not telling me how to keep myself safer. That's not teaching me how to have a healthy relationship with my body, or have a healthy relationship or an understanding of my reproductive system, right? Because when we continue to put our reproductive health at risk, we can experience things like infertility, or we can pass, sexually transmitted infections and HIV to our children if we're not in proper medical care, or, again, following up on testing and things like that. But then also, when we think about, again, the legacy of slavery and the intergenerational patterns that have been passed down, Black women just have a disjointed relationship with our bodies. We don't even touch our bodies. We don't even call our bodies the proper terminology. It's that we say, hey, don't touch down there, or we go to the physician. We don't even have the proper terminology of our body parts. We might call it, something like a punani or some type of coochie, or excuse my language, but a slang term, right? And we're not calling it, our body parts, the correct terminology, like a vagina. So we may miss the mark for treatment and conversations with our physicians, because sometimes they're not culturally competent, or we're missing the mark with our children because we're not teaching them the right body parts, and we're putting them at risk for sexual assault and all of these sorts of things. Because if my child comes to you or comes to me, and I've taught my child to call their vagina a pocketbook, and they're telling you that daddy is taking my pocketbook, you think daddy's stealing the little girl's pocketbook and her money. But you don't realize that she's saying that she's being sexually assaulted by daddy. And so it's so important to have these conversations and tie healthy sexuality, our reproductive health, into these conversations again, because if we don't, we are missing the mark, and we're failing people, and we're creating situations that help to put them at risk.
We're getting a good education today. But I want to step back for a minute. And when you were talking about the transmission routes, you mentioned breast milk. Mm-hmm. How is breast milk transmitting HIV? And are babies the only one that is transmitting it too?
So interestingly enough, when we talk about breast milk, the reason why breast milk is one of those fluids that help to facilitate the transmission of HIV, because it's made up of white blood cells. And as I mentioned earlier, when HIV enters the body, it enters those white blood cells. That's where it begins the process of all of these different things when we break down the science, which is a kind of a lot to do right now in this small space. But because breast milk is made of those white blood cells. And so even if, let's say, for example, a mother is on medications and she's able to have the baby, it reduces the baby's chances of being HIV positive to down below 1%. But however, after she has gave birth to the baby through a C-section, she still is not able to breast milk, or they still recommend that she doesn't breastfeed, because again, that breast milk can transmit the HIV, right, to the baby. However, we do know that during sex play, that babies are not the only people, that drink breast milk, and that during sex play, sometimes, their male partner or even their female partner may engage in some type of sex play that's engaged in, mouth contact to the breast. And so if a person is engaged in that type of sex play and the woman is HIV positive, there is a potential route of transmission for whoever is coming in contact with that breast milk, whether it's the baby or whether it's the partner.
Okay, thank you. And we talked about risk factors. Can we talk a few minutes about preventive factors? What are some preventive factors for HIV?
Absolutely. So, of course, we always talk about a condom used consistently and correctly with proper steps 99% of the time will help to reduce the transmission of HIV. Also, not sharing needles. If you have to share needles for whatever reason, you make sure you clean the needle with a solution. You can get, sometimes they have locations where you can go get a cleaning solution, a cleaning kit, which includes the solution, right, for your works, not just the needle, but also all the works that are used for injectable drugs. Also, we have biomedical interventions like PrEP, which is pre-exposure prophylaxis. So that means if someone who engaged in some type of sexual activity and they feel like they've been exposed to HIV, they can go to their physician, the emergency room within or some type of, organization within, is most effective within 48 to 70, if taken within 48 to 72 hours, and it will help to reduce a person's risk for coming in contact with HIV. If you have, wait a minute, I'm sorry, let me back that up. That is PEP, post-exposure prophylaxis. I'm sorry, that's PrEP I'm talking about. So when we talk about, PEP, when we talk about PrEP, which is pre-exposure prophylaxis, that is like the birth control pill for HIV. You take this pill every day and it helps to reduce, I said reduce, your risk of transmitting the virus to, risk of getting the virus from someone if you're having sexual intercourse. So let me back it up and be clear. PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, like a birth control pill for HIV. You take this pill every day and it reduces your chances of becoming HIV infected if you are engaging in things that may put you at risk. And then we have PEP, which is post-exposure. So if a person who has been exposed to HIV, they take this pill within 48 to 72 hours, it reduces their risk of becoming infected because the medication is designed to try to prevent HIV from binding to the white blood cells. So I hope I cleared that up. So those are some biomedical interventions. And then also, if you are living with HIV, they have what's called U equals U, undetectable, untransmittable. I caution that message. It's a message that's endorsed by the CDC, but I caution that message just because your viral load is undetectable, based on the current technology that we have on the market today when it comes to detecting HIV in the blood, it does not mean that HIV is no longer in the blood. It just means that it is not detected. And so while the data says that you can reduce your risk or virtually not transmit HIV to your partner, I still caution you because, again, you're relying on that person to make sure that they are consistent in following up with their medical appointments and that they're continuing to maintain this, what they call a suppressed viral load. But we know that once you have a virus, you'll always have a virus and it can be transmitted at any time. So I like to put that message out there following the U equals U and viral suppression conversation, because oftentimes people will stop at I can't transmit HIV. And that could potentially put people at risk because all you're hearing is, my partner is virally suppressed. I can't get HIV. And all they're hearing is, I'm virally suppressed. I can't give somebody HIV. But we need to, again, take it a step further and say that the risk is always there. So you should still be practicing condom usage and other safer sex methods.
Okay, wow. We've had a lot, you share a lot with us. We got a lot to take in. But right now, what I like to do is take the time to open it up and say, if there are any questions, put those questions in the chat. And while we have Dr. Tamara here to get the answers, I'm sure that she'll be happy to provide you with the answers. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll be happy to answer those questions for you.
Sister Bettina, we have some questions from social media.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay, so the first question is that somebody asked, I only know about World HIV/AIDS Day on December 1st. Are there other observances?
Yes, there are. There are several observances, like almost one every month, and I do not know them off the top of my head because they keep adding more and more. But of course, we have National Black HIV/AIDS Awareness Day, February 7th. I think March is February 10th. March 10th for National Women and Girls HIV/AIDS Awareness Day. Of course, in April, we have National Youth HIV/AIDS Awareness Day, and I believe that's like around April 7th or April 10th. And then when we look at June, we have National HIV Testing Day. I think that's June 27th. And I want to say there's a National HIV Faith Day, maybe around August, the August timeframe. And then when we look at December, there is World AIDS Day, December 1st. And of course, like I said, those are the main ones that are observed, but there are some other ones that have been added that I cannot call off the top of my head. So forgive me, there's no disrespect to any group that I have not remembered. So, but you can always probably go to the Department of Health and Human Services and search HIV National Observance Days, or go to CDC, or just do a Google search about National HIV Observance Days.
Thank you.
All right. We have another question. It says, what can state conventions and districts do to help promote HIV/AIDS awareness?
Create the safe space. And when we say the safe space, create that non-judgmental safe space for people to come and open up. So what does that look like, right? That can be a workshop. That can be just a roundtable discussion. It can be a panel discussion. It can look like involving a keynote speaker. It could involve like signing up for Your Blessed Health. And getting the training so that you can ultimately become a facilitator for Your Blessed Health and facilitate these types of programming in your church. It can look like creating a specialized program, like, again, a purity program, or what we did also with your center, we created what we call Sexperts, which was a group of peer health educators who educated not only their peers, meaning the youth, but they also worked with pastors on telling the pastors and the faith leaders how to educate their youth in their particular faith organization. So depending on your organization and what the convention and what they want to do, there's always some type of action step that you can take to incorporate these conversations within your conference, your organization, your church, or whatever the case may be. But just being even open is the first start, right?
Okay. I have one more question from our social media. It's asking, will the National Baptist collaborate with your center to offer some of these trainings? And I guess I'll jump in and say, I'm sure from our end, from the National Baptist, we'd be willing. So I'll defer to you now on the other end of that question.
Actually, we have several of the churches that are already a part of the Your Blessed Health group are a part of National Baptist, and we have been working with National Faith-Based Mobilization Network, or FaithMoNet, to spread the trainings. And so, yes, we would be willing to work with anyone. Basically, what our main goal is to help the leadership of the church to identify what their value system is, and then based on that value system, how they want to usher that program into the church.
That's all the questions that I have from our social media.
I don't have any other questions. If there are no other questions, then Dr. Minor, I'm going to say thank you, Dr. Rose, for joining us today. I certainly have learned a lot, and I'm open to sharing the information that I have learned. You are a wealth of knowledge, and we want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to be with us. And I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Minor.
Well, just before I go, Dr. Tamara, is there any last things that you just want to say? We're gonna put you on the big spotlight here. Hold on. There anything else? Any last message you want to say to everybody before we take over here?
I just want to first of all, just thank you, Dr. Minor and Mrs. Campbell, for spearheading this conversation, because it's very bold and it's very brave, especially for faith communities, to step up to the forefront and have this conversation about sexuality in a very real and raw way that is going to be beneficial and help save a life. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about, understanding that this is not an issue about sexuality or morality, but an issue about human lives and saving human lives, and not just, a human life, but our community, our lineage, and healing our legacy. And so, and being very unapologetic about that, because again, as we talked about earlier, we know that the church is the cornerstone and the foundation of the Black community. And so to see organizations like this stepping up to the front and spearheading the conversation is so necessary and it's so needed. So I thank you very much for creating that space. And again, I'm always a resource to anyone who wants to reach out to me. I'm available on all social media. I don't mind asking questions because I would rather have people have the information to keep themselves safer than making decisions that can put themselves and their family and their community ultimately at risk. Because while we know the individual may be the person that's infected, everybody else around them is affected in some capacity. And so with that, I just say thank you and I honor you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Rose. We really appreciate you sharing on today. And we want to just thank everybody that participated. We're thankful for the partnerships with the other organizations who also restreamed this. And as we said before, we're going to do a few edits, add some resources, and we'll do a premiere on YouTube. We'll let you know when that time will come. We also remind everyone about our newest initiative from the National Baptist Convention USA Incorporated. I'm sliding over here. It's the All of Us research program for the National Institutes of Health. You see the website there. It's a program that's working to enroll 1 million or more people in medical research. It is really, we found it to be most helpful during this COVID-19 pandemic, as people have been completing surveys to share about how they're doing during this COVID-19 pandemic. We certainly would encourage you to learn more about it by going to this website or going to our website, not go the other way, which is hopenbc.com. And we learn more about the All of Us research program. Oh, yes, I forgot. I got the signal there. And of course, in this COVID-19 pandemic, we want to make sure that we're wearing our mask. And I'll bring Sister Bettina up. She wants to also remind us that we want to make sure we're wearing our masks doing this, even once we get our shots. And Sister Betina's had our shot because we know that it's not 100% and that the vaccine, the virus can still be in our nostrils and infect someone else. So thank you for giving me the heads up there, Sister Bettina. All right, we do have another webinar coming up on February 18th. All right, that's in a couple of weeks, and that'll be in the evening. It's HIV/AIDS in the South, and it's an emphasis on the greater Memphis, Tennessee area, but it'll be applicable to whoever watches this. Dr. Latrice Pashon from the University of Memphis School of Public Health, Andrea Stubbs, the manager for community prevention programs at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, along with our very own Sister Bettina Campbell, who facilitate, will share on that evening. You can find more information on our Facebook page. Our marketing updates, this is, again, we're building up to National Black HIV/AIDS Sunday and Day, which is Sunday. You can go to our webpage, to the monthly health services, go to February and click on it. You can download a wonderful toolkit that provides you resources on that day. This also is American Heart Month. And on the second Sunday is Wear Red Sunday. We know we're going virtual. So hopefully you'll post on your Facebook pages, you wearing red, amen, for women and heart health. We want to be able to do that. We've done that for years from the National Baptist, and we're not going to let this pandemic keep us from doing so. Again, go to our webpage, hopenbc.com, for more information. Our Facebook page, National Baptist Convention USA Incorporated, Hope Health Initiative. We have our Twitter feed and our YouTube channel. We also want to give a shout out to our wonderful team who works with us tirelessly in this effort. Yours truly, Michael Miner, Lonnie Miner, Pastor Bernard Montgomery, Sister Bettina Campbell, who did an excellent job today, Pastor Dexter Moraney, Ellen McKnight, Dr. Felisa Washington, Minister Geraldine Moore, Dr. Desi Levy, Linda Copper, Loretta Miller, Dr. Lavora Williams, and Michelle Johnson. And again, we thank everybody that joined us, and I'm really ecstatic about all the people who took the time out across our social media platforms to join us today. Sister Bettina did a good job of putting this thing together, so we give a big shout out to her and the work that she has done, excellent in providing these and the questions and the work that went in to get this done. So now, once again, we acknowledge the chieftain of the National Baptist Convention USA Incorporated, Dr. Jerry Young, who reminds us that we have to envision the future exceptionally. And with this Hope Health Initiative, we're trying to fulfill that as we do the things that we can when it comes to health and wellness among the National Baptist Convention USA Incorporated, the nation's largest Black denomination. This has been a production of the National Baptist Convention USA Incorporated. We certainly hope that you will be blessed on the rest of your day. And this concludes this concludes the social media part of our broadcast, and we will resume shortly for all those on Zoom. Thank you for joining us on today.